The future isn't waiting for someone else, it's waiting for us. Welcome to Cortex Lab.
Think about the last time you sat through a truly brilliant hour-long meeting, or maybe an incredibly dense lecture.
Right, where you're just totally focused.
Exactly. You're completely dialed in, you've got your favorite pen, and you take like 3 solid pages of linear bullet point notes.
Top to bottom, left to right.
Yeah, just capturing every single data point you possibly can. But then, a week later, a massive crisis hits at work.
And you desperately need that exact information.
Right. So you flip open your notebook, you stare at those pages, and it honestly just looks like an alien language.
Like you didn't even write it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you read the words, but the context is completely gone. The underlying logic has just evaporated.
You remember absolutely nothing about how those isolated facts actually connect to one another.
Which is incredibly frustrating. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to examine a method that explains exactly why your brain actively deleted all that information.
And more importantly, how to actually trick your neurology into keeping it.
Yes, we are going to completely rewire how you take notes, how you solve complex problems, and really how you capture your own ideas.
Because the core problem you just described, it isn't actually a failure of your memory.
Oh, really?
No, not at all. It is a failure of formatting. It's a fundamental shift away from just the basic mechanics of recording data.
Okay, so moving toward what?
Moving toward the actual architecture of how we process the physical world around us.
I love that. And to understand this formatting failure, we are looking at one incredibly specific, highly detailed source today.
Right, it's a really fascinating text.
It is. It's a book called Mind Mapping, Step-by-Step Beginner's Guide in Creating Mind Maps by Scott Green.
And what this guide reveals is pretty staggering, honestly.
It really is. It argues that traditional linear note-taking is actually fighting against your brain's natural programming.
You are essentially paddling upstream against your own biology every time you make a bulleted list.
Which is wild to think about, since that's how we're all taught to do it. But this text offers a highly visual shortcut to just, stop fighting your brain.
And the claim here is substantial. The author states that changing this formatting can make you 15 to 20% more effective at retaining information.
15 to 20%. I mean, that is a massive return on investment for what is basically just a behavioral shift.
It really is. And the central thesis of Green's book is very foundational. It's this idea that knowledge is only truly valuable when it is understood and applied.
Right. Like simply absorbing a flood of data is completely useless if you can't retrieve it.
Exactly. If you can't pull it up when you actually need to make a decision, what's the point?
So mind mapping is presented here as the structural bridge between absorbing that data and actually weaponizing it for real-world application.
That's a great way to put it.
So I want to give you, the listener, a mental picture right out of the gate to sort of frame this entire conversation.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about packing a suitcase for a 2-week international trip.
Oh boy, that's always stressful.
Right. Well, traditional note-taking is the equivalent of just opening that suitcase and throwing everything in completely at random.
Just a chaotic mess.
Totally. You toss in shirts, shoes, a tangled mess of charging cables, your toothbrush, all in this massive disorganized pile.
And you just manage to force the lid shut by literally sitting on it.
Exactly. But then, you get to your hotel and you desperately need to find one specific pair of socks.
So you have to dig through the entire messy pile.
Right. You're disrupting everything else, making a huge mess just to find that one single item. It is frustrating and it is wildly inefficient.
And that is a perfect visualization of what a standard page of bulleted notes looks like to the human brain.
It just sees a pile of stuff.
Yeah, it's an undifferentiated, disorganized pile of data. There is no hierarchy, no relational context, and zero spatial awareness.
But mind mapping, which is what we're going to unpack today, is like using those incredible little packing cubes.
Oh, I love packing cubes.
They're life-changing,
Yeah.
Right? Because everything has a specific, interconnected place. The socks are bundled with the underwear in one specific corner.
The chargers are strapped in with the electronics in another corner.
Exactly. So when you open that suitcase, you have a perfect bird's eye view of everything you own. You know exactly where everything belongs without having to dig around for it.
You just reach in and grab what you need.
So moving from the theory of the suitcase to the reality on the page, what exactly are we looking at here? Like structurally, what is a mind map?
Well, based strictly on the text, a mind map is a web-like structure.
Okay, a web.
Yeah. It is composed of words, images, and connecting lines, all created with one sole intention:
Jason.
the visual organization of information. It always begins with a single concept or a main topic drawn right in the dead center of a blank page.
Right in the middle.
Always. And the text specifies this should usually be on a landscape page.
Meaning the paper is wider than it is tall, like a movie screen.
Correct. And from that single central topic, other major concepts are drawn out, branching away from the center toward the edges of the page.
The text actually brings up the idea of a spider diagram in mathematics, or an Euler diagram. But honestly, I find the other analogy Green uses far more compelling.
The sun bursting one.
Yeah, idea sunbursting. I think that paints a much more vivid picture of the actual mechanic.
It really does.
The main idea is the sun, right in the center, hot and bright, and all the subtopics are the rays of light shooting out from it in every direction.
It captures the radiating nature of the map perfectly, because instead of reading sequentially from top to bottom like we normally do,
Right, reading lines on a page.
yeah, instead of that, your eye starts in the middle and radiates outward, and from those main rays of light, supporting words and ideas form minor topics.
Branching out further and further.
Exactly, until the very last, most granular idea is reached at the outer edge.
Okay, let's construct a concrete example so you can really see this in your mind's eye while we talk.
Good idea.
Let's say the central topic, that sun in the middle of our landscape page, is the concept of stress.
Okay, so the word stress is in the middle.
Right. The major concepts branching out from that center might be broad categories like definition of stress, theories of stress, and types of stress.
Okay, so those are the thick main rays of the sun.
Exactly. And from those primary branches, you grow smaller sub-branches.
So extending off, say, types of stress, you might draw lines connecting to factors causing stress, effects of stress, and management of stress.
And it just continues to fracture into more specific details. From management of stress, you draw even smaller twigs for relaxation techniques.
Or maybe dietary changes.
Yeah. You can see how this single word in the middle suddenly explodes into an entire interconnected landscape of information.
It's extremely visual.
But this brings up the fundamental question of causality. Okay, let's unpack this. Why does this spider web of words work better than just writing a nice, neat, linear list?
That is the big question.
I mean, we have been conditioned to make outlines with Roman numerals since elementary school. If we are going to completely abandon that, I really need to know the biological mechanism that makes the lists the enemy here.
Well, it comes down to understanding how the brain functions as a defensive filter.
A defensive filter.
Yeah.
Like, it's trying to protect us.
Exactly. The human brain receives an absolute flood of sensory information every single second of the day, and it attempts to store this information in a knowledge bank ready for retrieval.
But it can't keep everything. Right.
Not even close. The brain actively drops non-vital information to prevent cognitive overload.
So it's constantly deleting stuff.
Yes. Only the data that the brain specifically tags as vital makes the cut to be retained. Everything else is just flushed.
So the brain essentially has a bouncer at the door of the memory club, and it's just ruthlessly checking IDs.
That's a great analogy, yes.
So how do we format our notes to trick the bouncer into letting them into the club?
Well, Green outlines several specific factors that dictate how the brain decides what is actually memorable. And the very first one is foundational biology.
Which means what exactly?
The brain's general health. The healthier the physical brain, the higher the retention. It requires adequate rest, stimulation, exercise, nutrients, and oxygen.
You know, there is a highly specific, almost funny detail in the text regarding brain health.
Oh, about the headgear.
Yes. It explicitly states you need to protect your brain from trauma by wearing appropriate headgears when necessary.
I know, it seems so out of place for a note-taking book.
I definitely laughed when I read it, but it underscores a brutally practical point. I mean, a concussed brain is not going to remember your brilliant mind map.
Very true. Physical protection is the absolute prerequisite for cognitive function. But moving past general health, we hit the first major formatting mechanism.
Okay. What's it?
The number of senses used. The biological rule is absolute here. The more sensory pathways you engage, the higher the retention of the memory.
The text highlights this with a brilliant comparison that completely changed how I view adult learning, honestly.
It's a great example.
It contrasts the nursery school teacher with the college professor. Think about how a nursery teacher educates small children.
They definitely don't just stand at a chalkboard and write out the alphabet.
Right. They don't expect kids to passively stare at the board while taking notes.
No, the nursery environment is designed for intentional sensory overload.
Yes. The children see the visual shape of the letter, but they also hear it by singing the alphabet song.
And they physically touch the letters by molding them out of clay or, tracing them in a sandbox.
The text even points out the olfactory and gustatory engagement, which is crazy.
The tasting and smelling part.
Yeah. Teachers have them taste the alphabet by asking them to bring in food that starts with the letter they are studying.
So they hold the apple, smell the apple, and taste the apple while focusing on the letter A.
They are firing on the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and gustatory cylinders simultaneously. All those different neural pathways are lighting up and pointing to the exact same piece of information.
And as a result, the learning is incredibly fast, and it is durable enough to last a lifetime.
Now look at the college student.
Totally different world.
They sit in a sterile lecture hall. They passively listen to a professor drone on for an hour. They passively encode words in a linear list on a flat piece of paper.
They are engaging perhaps 1.5 senses at best.
Which is why college students routinely have to cram the night before an exam, only to experience massive memory decay a week later.
Exactly. They haven't built enough sensory pathways to the data.
So how does mind mapping fix that for adults?
Well, mind mapping forces adult learners to pull more senses back into the process. The physical act of drawing, the spatial awareness of where concepts live on the physical page.
The integration of multiple colors and imagery.
Right. It mimics that multisensory nursery environment, but within the constraints of a professional setting.
That makes total sense. Now, beyond engaging the senses, the text introduces another vital mechanism the brain uses to filter information.
Association and emotion.
Yes, linking abstract data to vital life events or strong emotional states acts as a binding agent for memory.
Consider your own episodic memory for a second. You can likely recall the smallest, most granular details from a day where something highly emotional happened.
Like a wedding or a car crash.
Exactly. You remember the exact temperature of the air, the song playing on the radio, or the exact phrasing someone used during that traumatic or incredibly joyous event.
But you cannot remember what you ate for lunch 12 days ago.
Because 12 days ago, lunch had 0 emotional weight.
The brain's bouncer looked at that turkey sandwich, decided it was incredibly boring, and just deleted the file.
Exactly. Good memories stick around because of the emotional tag. Interestingly, the text also notes that bad memories are sometimes actively erased or repressed by the subconscious.
As a defense mechanism, right?
Yes, which just further proves how deeply emotion governs retention.
So how does a mind map tap into this? Drawing a budget doesn't exactly make me emotional.
Mind mapping taps into the associative power of emotion. By forcing you to make active, physical lines connecting different ideas, you are spatially linking concepts together on the page.
Okay, so the act of drawing the line is key.
Yes. This physical linking signals to the brain that these concepts share a relationship, stimulating the associative tags that emotions naturally create.
Okay, I understand the theory here. The multisensory engagement, the associative linking, it sounds like a cognitive superpower.
It can be.
But I always approach productivity hacks with a heavy dose of skepticism. There's always a hidden cost, right?
Sure, nothing is perfect.
I want another reality check. What is the downside to actually implementing this system?
Well, Green is actually remarkably transparent about the disadvantages. He provides a really necessary, balanced view.
Which I appreciate.
The most significant hurdle is a psychological barrier we can call the 21-day habit rule.
But 21-day habit rule, meaning just the sheer friction of changing how we think.
Precisely. The text states that for this visual, nonlinear habit to replace decades of linear conditioning, a minimum of 21 days is required.
Wow, 21 days.
Yeah. For someone encountering mind mapping for the very first time, looking at this sprawling web of colors and branches causes massive initial resistance.
Well, yeah, because we have been punished in school for doodling and rewarded for writing in straight lines for 20 years.
Exactly. The text actually cites that it requires roughly 12 dedicated, specific mind mapping sessions before a person who is resistant to the method can actually conform to its rules.
12 sessions just to stop fighting it.
Just to begin to feel comfortable with it, yes.
Pushing through 12 sessions of feeling incredibly inefficient, feeling like you're doing it wrong, or feeling like it's taking 3 times as long as just writing a normal list.
It's hard.
That is a very steep barrier to entry. I could see a lot of people abandoning the method on day 3.
Oh, absolutely. It actively challenges established patterns of thinking.
Does it affect everyone equally?
Not necessarily. Green points out that highly intuitive individuals tend to grasp the fluid nature of it fairly quickly.
But what about the rest of us?
Well, for logical thinkers, professionals who rely on spreadsheets, strict outlines, and rigid order-linear note-taking feels much safer. It feels more compatible.
So they will experience the highest friction.
They will. However, the text asserts that given ample time, and if they push through those 12 sessions, even the most rigid logical thinkers eventually learn to favor mind mapping.
Because of the results.
Because of the sheer retrieval speed. Once you get it, it's just faster.
Okay, but there's another massive disadvantage mentioned in the text that I found fascinating.
Which one?
The complete loss of objective meaning. Like a mind map is highly personal cryptography.
Oh, yes. That is a huge caveat.
With traditional linear notes, the text is somewhat universal, right?
Usually, yes.
Like you missed a lecture, you could theoretically borrow a colleague's notebook, read the sentences they wrote, and mostly comprehend the topic.
But that does not work with a mind map.
Not at all. Someone who is not part of a specific mind mapping session will look at the resulting map and get completely lost.
Because the single keywords, the hand-drawn symbols, the spatial clustering, they form a shorthand that only makes semantic sense to the creator.
Green uses a brilliant example to illustrate this danger. He calls it the vital statistics misunderstanding.
Yes, that's a perfect example of this vulnerability.
I really want to flesh this out because it perfectly highlights the danger of using single keywords.
Go for it.
Imagine a group of medical students creating a collaborative mind map to study for a critical exam. They decide to use the keyword vital statistics as a primary branch for a section on how to assess a hypertensive patient.
Okay, so within the context of their specific study session, they all mutually agree on what that means.
Right. To them, the phrase vital statistics is a shorthand code representing the actions of taking a patient's blood pressure, temperature, pulse rate, and respiration.
So for that group, the meaning is completely locked in.
Exactly. But imagine a different student, someone who was sick that day, borrows that mind map later to cram for the test.
Oh, no.
They see this thick branch simply labeled vital statistics. Now, outside of that specific medical study context, vital statistics usually refers to demographic numbers, right?
Like the mortality rate of hypertension in a specific region, yeah.
Or, in a completely different colloquial context, it literally refers to body measurements, waist, bust, and hip size.
Which means the borrowing student goes into the medical exam operating under the assumption that assessing hypertension involves taking a patient's waist measurements.
Exactly. It demonstrates so clearly that a mind map is not a textbook meant for public consumption.
No, it is a deeply personal memory trigger.
It only functions for the original contributors, and it can be a source of massive operational confusion for outsiders.
That's a very real downside you have to manage.
And finally, there is the simple fact that creating a genuinely effective mind map is difficult at first.
It does take practice.
It looks deceptively easy, just drawing bubbles and lines.
Yeah.
But architecting a structure that actually accelerates learning requires strict adherence to specific rules.
Which leads us perfectly into the mechanics of how to do this.
Right. Because despite the 21-day learning curve, and despite the fact that it looks like gibberish to anyone else, the Tox claims the pros far outweigh the cons. Why is it worth it?
Because it forces the simultaneous engagement of both the left and right hemispheres of the brain.
Multiprocessing.
Exactly. The left hemisphere, which governs analytical thought, is engaged by the use of words, the categorization of data, and the logical hierarchy of the branches.
And the right brain.
The right hemisphere, which governs spatial awareness and creativity, is stimulated by the layout, the colors, the imagery, and the curved lines.
You are forcing the brain to multiprocess the exact same piece of information from two completely different angles.
Right. And the text claims this visual graphical tool is 6 times more effective for making a memory imprint than standard notes.
6 times. Now, I have to challenge that number a bit. 6 times more effective seems like an astronomical, almost unbelievable jump in cognitive performance.
It is a huge claim.
Is that purely anecdotal, or is there a functional biological reason for that specific multiplier?
Well, while the exact metric of 6 times might vary depending on the individual's baseline memory, the underlying cognitive function is sound.
Okay, how so?
The brain essentially takes a literal photographic picture of the map. When you recall a linear list, you are trying to remember the semantic meaning of the words.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard. But when you recall a mind map, you are recalling a spatial image. And visual memory is historically much stronger and older in human evolution than semantic text-based memory.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It also solves the problem of getting lost in the weeds. Green notes that it provides both a bird's-eye view and microscopic detail at a single glance.
Yes. You can see the entire forest, but you can instantly zoom in on a single specific leaf without losing the context of the tree it's attached to.
It summarizes complex data immediately, saving precious cognitive load. You aren't forcing yourself to blindly memorize isolated, disconnected details.
You are seeing the actual skeletal structure of the knowledge.
Okay, since we have established the biological why and we know the hurdles of the 21-day curve, let's get our hands dirty with the practical application.
Let's do it.
How exactly do we build one of these? The text is incredibly strict about the preparation phase. You don't just, grab a napkin and a leaky pen at a coffee shop.
No, the environment and the materials are critical to this working. First, you require blank, unlined paper, preferably size A4 or larger.
No lines. That's hard for me.
It has to be unlined. And as we mentioned earlier, it must be oriented in landscape mode, meaning the paper is wider than it is tall.
Okay, I really want to drill down into this landscape rule.
Sure.
Why does the physical orientation of the paper matter so much? I have a portrait-oriented notebook sitting right here on my desk. Why shouldn't I just use it?
It is about spatial runway and peripheral vision.
Spatial runway.
Yes. Human eyes are situated side by side on our face, right? Our natural field of vision is panoramic. We are built to scan the horizon.
Okay, I'm tracking.
When you start branching out in a 360-degree circle from the center of a portrait-oriented page, your vertical branches, the ones going up and down, will bump into the top and bottom edges almost immediately.
Right, because there's less space vertically.
Exactly, which causes crowding. The brain hates crowding. Landscape orientation aligns with our natural panoramic vision and gives you the horizontal runway necessary to let complex ideas expand without artificial constriction.
That makes perfect biological sense. So we have the landscape paper. We need at least 3 colors of pens or markers, which we will dissect the logic of shortly.
Yes, colors are very important.
And green emphasizes that your physical environment must be perfectly comfortable. The lighting, the room temperature, the chair you're sitting in.
All of it. If you are hungry, if you're shivering or dealing with a flickering light bulb, your brain is dedicating background processing power to managing that discomfort.
It's distracted.
Yes. You need the brain completely relaxed so the creative side can fully engage with the map.
Okay, so once the environment is dialed in, the creation begins at the center. You place your main topic right in the middle of the page.
Always in the middle.
But green introduces a fascinating non-negotiable rule here. Here's where it gets really interesting. The center should not simply be a written word. It must be an image, roughly 1 to 2 inches in size.
That is correct.
This is where I struggle, honestly. Why an image? I am terrible at drawing. If the topic is a company budget, why can't I just write the word budgetee in big bold letters and be done with it?
Because the plain word does not provide an initial creative spark.
It doesn't.
No. Seeing a physical image, even a poorly drawn abstract representation of a stack of coins, instantly stimulates the right cortical side of the brain.
So even if it's a terrible doodle, it still works.
Absolutely. It stirs up the imagination, forcing the brain to process related visual data, which actually catalyzes the branching of new ideas.
And there is a deeply psychological rule tied to this central image. The text bolds this warning. Do not put the central image in a box or a frame.
Yes, a frame, whether it is a rigidly drawn square or even a perfect circle enclosing that central image, acts as a visual cage.
A cage.
It signals the subconscious brain to contain or restrict the ideas within that boundary.
It implies a finished thought, like a framed painting on a wall. It essentially says, this is complete, do not add anything else to it.
Precisely. An unframed image, on the other hand, implies openness. It lacks a psychological boundary, which actively encourages free-flowing branches to radiate outward organically.
So we have our unframed right brain stimulating image right in the center. Next, we build the skeleton, the main branches.
Right. These main themes radiate directly out from the central image, and the structural rules for these primary branches are highly specific.
They really are.
They must be curved, thick lines, and crucially, they must be of the exact same length.
Okay, I have to pause and interrogate that.
I knew you would.
Why curved? And why the exact same length? This seems awfully strict for a tool that is supposed to unleash fluid creativity. If I want to draw straight, angular arrows pointing to my ideas, why shouldn't I?
It all comes down to cognitive friction. The brain reacts to straight lines drawn with a ruler with a sense of rigidity.
It feels mechanical.
Yes. It evokes spreadsheets, industrial architecture, and artificial boundaries. Curved lines, however, mimic biometric patterns found in nature.
Like the branches of a tree.
Exactly. Or the meandering path of a river, or even the neural pathways in the brain itself. The brain processes these organic shapes with far less resistance,
Making them less boring to look at.
and allowing lateral thinking to flow much more freely.
Okay, and the thickness of the lines. Why do they have to be thick?
In visual mapping, thickness equals importance. The lines connecting the center to the main themes should be the thickest on the entire page.
Much like the heavy trunk of a tree splitting into its largest boughs.
Yes, it creates an instant visual hierarchy. You know immediately what the most important concepts are.
What about the rule insisting they all be the exact same lengths? That feels weird to me.
This relies on how the human brain perceives relational connections. If you draw 4 main branches and one line is drawn twice as long as the others, the brain gets confused.
It does.
Yes. The brain's associative nature might process that longer line as a completely disconnected, separate topic drifting away from the core.
Oh, I see.
Maintaining the exact same length for all primary branches visually accentuates their shared connection back to the central hub. It tells the brain these concepts are all siblings of equal weight. They all share the exact same relationship to the parent idea in the middle.
Wow. That is so subtle, but makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
And to reinforce that hierarchy, the text specifies that the key words written on these main, thick branches must be printed, and they must be written in all cap S.
Yes, legibility is key.
Big, thick lines, all cap S words. Those are the foundational pillars. From there, we fracture into the details.
From the ends of your thick main branches, you draw thinner lines representing the subtopics.
So the line physically shrinks.
The thinner line instantly signifies to the brain that this information is of greater specificity or maybe lesser global importance than the main theme.
And what about the text on these thinner lines?
The words on these sub-branches should still be printed for legibility, but you use lowercase letters.
Thick lines and all CFPS for the main ideas. Thinner lines and lowercase for the details. It is literally a self-organizing visual filing system.
It is. You just keep branching, drawing thinner and thinner twigs, adding lowercase keywords until you reach what you feel is the absolute final granular idea on that specific train of thought.
That forms the skeletal structure. But Green dedicates significant focus to the elements that bring the map to life, what we might call the nervous system of the map.
Right, the fun stuff.
The first of these elements is color.
Which explains the requirement for at least 3 colored pens. Colors aren't just decorative here, they are a functional coding system.
Because a black and white map doesn't trigger the right hemisphere nearly as effectively, right?
Exactly. Colors provide intrinsic, immediate messages. You can use them strategically as behavioral signals. Green uses the universal example of traffic lights.
Oh, right.
If you are mind mapping a complex project timeline, you might mandate that all actionable, approved items are written on green branches. Green universally signals go positive action.
While red is the universal signal to stop or avoid. If you are making a map about managing that hypertension we discussed earlier, the branch listing dietary restrictions like high-sodium foods would be drawn in red ink.
The color physically reinforces the avoidance message of the words.
But there is a massive warning light flashing in the text here about color. Do not overcolor.
It is a very common beginner's mistake.
People just go crazy with the highlighters.
They do. If you use 10 different colors randomly just to make the map look vibrant, you completely destroy the coding system.
It just becomes a rainbow explosion.
Which causes cognitive overload. Adding more colors than necessary doesn't add value. It forces the brain to constantly try to decipher a pattern that doesn't actually exist.
Which just causes confusion. So use colors intentionally and maintain strict consistency.
Exactly.
The next element Green heavily emphasizes is the use of icons and symbols, just miniature pictures scattered throughout the map.
Yes, an icon can completely replace dense text, which is the ultimate goal here.
So drawing a tiny simple light bulb next to a branch about a new marketing idea.
Or a little exclamation point next to a critical deadline, it bypasses the need to read a full sentence.
Your brain sees the light bulb and instantly grasps the context. It makes processing the map later practically effortless.
It does. But again, there is a vulnerability here we need to mention.
Right. The text explicitly warns. Always include a legend.
Yes, a legend is critical. If you decide today that a tiny star icon means requires immediate funding, You must write that down in the corner of the page.
Because a year from now, you might look at that exact same star and assume it means completed.
And that would be a disaster for your project.
Managing the lines and boundaries is another crucial element. Beyond the thick and thin solid lines, green notes that broken or dashed lines can be highly effective.
They are great for showing indirect relationships between two completely different branches, basically cross-pollinating ideas across the map.
And then there are floating topics, which have no connecting lines whatsoever. They just sit isolated in the open space of the page.
We'll talk more about how to use those in a minute, but yes, they are very useful.
What about boundaries? Like drawing a cloud or a box around a whole cluster of branches. I know we aren't supposed to frame the center image, but what about the outer branches?
Boundaries should be used exceedingly sparingly.
Why is that?
They should only be deployed when a specific cluster of vital information absolutely must stand out from the rest of the landscape. If you start drawing boxes around every single keyword, you flatten the visual hierarchy.
Because if everything stands out, nothing stands out.
Exactly. It defeats the purpose of emphasizing what is truly critical.
The final structural element is topic notes and callouts. This addresses a major anxiety for people transitioning to this system. What do I do with long text?
That is the #1 question I get.
Because the fundamental rule of mind mapping is keywords only, right? 1 or 2 words per branch. But what if I am mapping a legal document and I absolutely must retain an entire paragraph of highly specific, nuanced information?
Right. A single keyword won't cover legal jargon.
Exactly.
So what do we do?
That is where topic notes are utilized. If you were using digital mind mapping software, this is usually a built-in feature where a long paragraph of text is hidden behind a small icon, expandable with a single click.
Oh, that's handy. But what if you were operating analog on physical paper?
A topic note might be a small, sticky note physically placed onto the map. Or you could use a numbering system on the branch that refers to a separate, traditional notebook page containing the long-form text.
So it keeps the map visually decluttered while retaining the tether to the deep information.
Exactly.
And callouts, what are those? Callouts function as navigational flags. They are little speech bubbles or bold text floating near a branch that give instructions on how to actually read the map.
Things like, start here, or verify this data before proceeding.
Yes, they are meta instructions for the user.
Okay, so we have thoroughly dissected the anatomy, the landscape paper, the unframed center, the biometric curved lines, the color psychology.
We've built the machine.
Now, I want to know how this actually looks in the wild. If we apply this theory to real-world scenarios from the text, let's start with the most common pain point: note-taking and studying during a live event.
Well, traditional note-taking during a lecture is inherently reactive.
Reactive meaning you're just waiting for things to happen.
Yes. You are passively listening, furiously scribbling, relying on shorthand abbreviations, and hoping you can decipher your own handwriting days later.
Which is always a gamble.
Worse, the structure of your notes is entirely dictated by the chronological order in which the speaker presents the information.
Which, let's be honest, is rarely the most logical way to categorize data.
Right. Mind mapping flips this reactive posture entirely by introducing the concept of the pre-map.
The pre-map. Okay, tell me about this.
The pre-map is the structural preparation you execute before the meeting or lecture even begins.
So you don't wait for the speaker to start.
No. If you are attending a meeting about the Q3 marketing budget, you do not sit down with a blank page. You draw your central image, and you draw the thick main theme branches. Perhaps ad spend, personnel, software, before the speaker ever opens their mouth.
I picture this exactly like setting a dinner table before the meal is actually cooked.
That's a perfect analogy.
You put out the dinner plates, the salad bowls, the silverware in their proper places. You have established the architecture of the meal.
Yes.
When the food, which represents the incoming knowledge from the speaker, finally comes out of the kitchen, you don't panic and throw it all in a bucket.
No, you calmly drop the protein onto the dinner plate and the greens into the salad bowl.
You are simply placing the incoming data onto the correct pre-existing branches.
It allows for active categorization in real time, which drastically reduces your cognitive load.
But the system has to account for chaos, right?
It does.
What happens when the speaker talks too fast or throws out an entirely new concept and you do not instantly know which branch it belongs on? In traditional note-taking, this causes a huge break in concentration.
That is the moment of panic where you stop listening to what they are currently saying because you were trying to figure out where to write down what they just said.
Exactly.
Ah.
So how does mind mapping solve that?
It solves it with the floating topic we mentioned earlier. When an orphaned idea pops up, you do not force it into a branch.
You don't try to cram it in?
No, you simply write the keyword down in the empty white space of the paper, completely unattached to the main web.
You just pull it over and park it on the side of the road.
Exactly. You do not let it interrupt your processing flow. Then, after the lecture concludes, while your short-term memory is still fresh, you review those floating topics.
You logically deduce where they belong, and then you draw the connecting lines to the appropriate branches.
Yes. Furthermore, Green highly recommends the practice of redrawing the entire map on a clean piece of paper shortly after the event.
Wait, redrawing the whole thing? That sounds like a lot of work.
It is work, but redrawing it forces you to synthesize the messy, live map into a clean, permanent architecture.
It acts as an immediate review session, which heavily cements the memory. I get it. Now, let's look at another application. Problem solving in project management.
This is where it gets really powerful.
If note-taking is about absorbing existing information, how do we use this architecture to generate our own solutions to a problem that doesn't have an answer yet?
The text advocates for the 5W and a 1H method for problem resolution.
Who, what, where, when, why, and how. The fundamental journalistic questions.
Exactly. Green provides a highly specific, universally relatable example of deploying this method. The overarching problem is a need to save money.
Okay, so instead of staring at a daunting spreadsheet of expenses, you put a bundle of bills as the unframed image in the center of the page.
Right. And from that center, you draw 6 main equal-length branches: who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Let's walk through that. If we follow the what branch, what are we generating?
Under what, you branch out into identifying what specifically you are trying to save. And it forces lateral thinking.
Because it isn't just cash.
No. You might draw sub-branches for saving time, saving physical energy, or cutting specific subscription expenditures. You are visually breaking the monolithic anxiety of saving money into manageable components.
That's great. And the who branch is where the psychological aspect gets really interesting to me.
It's very revealing.
Under who, you obviously list the people who can help you reach your financial goal, like financial advisors or supportive partners. But the text suggests creating a sub-branch specifically dedicated to people you need to avoid hanging out with if you want to save money.
Oh, yes. We all have individuals in our social circles whose presence correlates with high expenditure.
The friends who insist on expensive dinners or lavish trips.
Exactly. By physically drawing a branch labeled avoid and attaching their names to it, you are taking an abstract, often unacknowledged social dynamic and mapping it as a spatial geometric boundary.
You are making the emotional obstacle visible. It turns a vague, overwhelming anxiety into a visual, actionable strategy.
It's a very practical way to handle it.
Now, the text claims that some corporate executives attribute up to 30% of successful problem resolution to using this exact visual mapping method.
That's a big number.
Again, I have to view that 30% metric with a critical eye. Is that a hard data point, or is it reflective of a broader cognitive shift?
The 30% figure likely represents a self-reported increase in efficiency rather than an empirical scientific constant. However, the mechanism behind that perceived success is undeniable.
Because executives deal with such complex issues.
Executives are plagued by complex, multivariable problems. The 5W1H map provides a holistic bird's-eye view, forcing the brain to acknowledge variables, like the who to avoid branch, that a strictly logical, numbers-driven spreadsheet completely ignores. It forces both logical constraints and creative interpersonal solutions to the surface simultaneously. That makes sense. Let's transition to a demographic that apparently doesn't need to be convinced of any of this. Kids.
Ah, yes, kids love this.
The text gets remarkably insightful regarding mind mapping for children. It emphasizes that kids are absolute naturals at this. They do not need 21 days to overcome resistance.
No, because they have not yet been institutionally trained out of their natural cognitive state.
Right. Green explains that children are naturally highly imaginative, visual, and right brain dominant.
They process their reality through pictures, vibrant colors, and fluid associations long before they ever master rigid syntax. While adults have spent decades in schools and corporate offices being systematically trained to be overly logical, linear, and left-brain dominant, we have literally had the creativity disciplined out of our note-taking.
It's true. Therefore, when you present a mind map to a child, it feels like a native language to them. But the text establishes a strict pedagogical rule for adults introducing this concept to children.
Which is?
You do not teach a child to mind map, you coach them.
Explain the distinction there. Why is teaching the wrong approach?
Well, teaching, in a traditional sense, implies imposing a rigid set of rules and demanding compliance.
You must draw the line this thick.
Exactly. It turns the creative process into a chore. Coaching implies guiding them to discover the architecture themselves. Green provides a beautiful, practical example of how to execute this during story time.
Yeah, you don't hand a 6-year-old a syllabus on branch thickness.
Definitely not. While you are verbally telling them a highly descriptive story, you provide them with a blank landscape piece of paper and simply ask them to draw what they are hearing.
You let their imagination dictate the flow.
Yes. Then, the crucial step. When the story concludes, you ask the child to retell the narrative back to you, using only their drawing as the guide.
That is incredibly smart. They are using their own visual associative map to retrieve the narrative data. They are practicing the exact cognitive retrieval mechanism we discussed earlier, but doing it through play.
Exactly. Another practical application Green suggests is planning a birthday party.
Oh, this is a good one.
Instead of the parent managing a hidden checklist, you place a clean sheet of paper on the table. You draw an unframed picture of the child in the center holding a balloon.
No frame.
No frame.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask the child to help draw the branches. Who are we inviting? What specific games are we playing? What food are we serving?
You are utilizing the 5W and 1H problem-solving method, but tailored perfectly for a child's understanding.
It makes them an active architect in organizing their own reality.
And the profound implication here is that if a child grows up organizing their thoughts this way, they will never have to suffer through those 12 agonizing sessions of resistance when they enter the adult workforce.
It simply becomes their automatic operating system.
Now, to fully grasp the implementation of this system, we really must address the hidden requirements, because mind mapping does not function in a vacuum.
It really doesn't.
I can personally attest to this. A long time ago, during a highly complex live interview, I attempted to make a mind map.
How'd it go?
Terrible. I had my landscape paper, I drew my unframed center image, I drew my thick curved branches, and within 10 minutes the entire thing completely collapsed.
What happened?
I realized I was just writing down entire long-form sentences on top of crooked lines. It was a complete disaster.
You fell into the most common trap for beginners. Green explicitly states that the physical drawing of the map is only half the equation.
There's more.
Yes. Mind mapping requires 3 supporting auxiliary skills to function effectively. If you lack these cognitive skills, the visual architecture will collapse under the weight of the incoming information, just like you experienced.
Okay, what is the first skill?
The first of these required skills is active listening.
Which means far more than just passively hearing the words and waiting for my turn to speak.
Much more. Active listening requires the aggressive avoidance of selective listening.
Selective listening.
Yes. That is the dangerous habit of only tuning in to information that confirms what you already believe, or filtering out data that contradicts your preconceptions.
If you selectively listen, your mind map will contain massive intellectual blind spots.
Exactly. Active listening also demands the interpretation of nonverbal data.
The text mentions that reading body language, facial expressions, changes in tone, even the physical distance the speaker maintains, sends messages that are often louder than the spoken words themselves.
Absolutely. If a speaker verbally states that a specific data point is merely a minor detail, but they simultaneously lean forward, raise their voice, and pound the podium.
Your active listening dictates that you ignore the verbal minimization and draw a thick primary branch for that topic.
Exactly. The map must reflect the true weight of the information, not just the raw transcript.
Okay, so that's active listening. The second auxiliary skill required is speed reading. And green doesn't just mean skimming a page quickly to get it over with, right?
No, the text demands fast reading with high immediate comprehension. Because if you are mapping a dense document, you have to be able to process the text rapidly enough to distill it down to a single perfect keyword.
Which is really hard.
It is. The text provides highly actionable physiological tips for speed reading, though. The most critical intervention is read with your eyes, not your lips.
Subvocalizing.
Yeah.
The habit of silently saying every single word in your head as you read it. I'm so guilty of this.
Most people are. But subvocalization physically limits your reading speed to the speed of your spoken speech, which is incredibly slow compared to how fast the brain can actually process visual symbols.
So how do we stop doing it?
Green recommends literally putting a finger to your mouth while you read to physically interrupt the habit of moving your lips or engaging the vocal cords.
It sounds kind of absurd, but it is a wildly practical tip to break a lifelong habit. The text also advises grouping words together visually, rather than reading single words sequentially.
Hold the book further away from your face to expand your field of vision, allowing you to take in chunks of words simultaneously.
The goal is to capture the structural gist of the sentence, rather than focusing on individual syllables.
Furthermore, Green insists on avoiding the urge to reread lines.
Regression.
Yes, regression is a massive drain on processing speed. You must trust that your subconscious captured the context the first time.
The text also advocates for reading the structural elements, the titles, subtitles, introduction, and conclusion, before ever reading the body paragraphs.
Yes. This provides the brain with a pre-existing scaffolding, much like the pre-map we discussed for lectures.
All of these speed reading techniques allow you to ingest data fast enough to map it efficiently without getting bogged down in the syntax.
And the final, perhaps most difficult auxiliary skill required is discipline.
Discipline. Just committing to the learning curve.
Exactly. It requires the discipline to push through those initial 12 frustrating sessions without reverting back to a linear list.
It requires the discipline to practice the strict rules, the curved lines, the color codes, the unframed center, so you do not build sloppy habits.
Most importantly, it takes immense intellectual discipline to stop writing comfortable, long sentences and force yourself to do the hard work of finding the one perfect keyword that encapsulates the entire thought.
We have covered a massive expanse of cognitive territory today. Let me attempt to synthesize this deep dive for you, the listener, into the core actionable takeaways from Scott Green's text.
Let's hear the summary.
Step 1. You must fundamentally accept the biological reality that your brain is not designed to be a filing cabinet for linear, monochromatic lists. Your neurology demands interconnected, multisensory, visual data.
Right. Stop fighting your brain.
Step 2. You have to adopt the strict structural tools to feed the brain what it wants. Start with a central, unframed image on landscape paper. Draw thick, curved main branches of equal length to establish hierarchy. Fracture out into thinner twigs. And use intentional color codes and icons to bypass the friction of dense text.
Perfect.
Step 3. Apply the architecture actively. Do not be reactive. Set the cognitive table with a pre-map before the meeting starts. When chaos hits, do not panic, use floating topics and redraw the map later to cement the memory.
And the final step.
Step 4. Cultivate the relentless discipline, the active listening, and the speed reading required to actually execute this without falling back into old habits.
If we pull back and look at the broader implications of this text, what we are really analyzing here isn't just an art project, and it certainly isn't just a quirky productivity hack.
It's much bigger than that.
Mind mapping, as presented by Green, is a comprehensive cognitive management system. It is a framework that finally honors how human memory and creativity actually function by forcibly blending the analytical processing of the left brain with the spatial associative processing of the right brain.
It is a tool designed to stop you from fighting your own biology.
Yeah.
And speaking of that biological baseline, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today based on the mechanics we've explored.
Let's hear it.
We learned today that for this fluid, highly visual, highly effective method to become a habit, it takes an adult 21 days, or about 12 dedicated friction-filled sessions, just to overcome the stubborn resistance of your logical, linear adult conditioning.
It's a tough transition.
It is.
Ugh.
But we also learned that a 6-year-old child adopts this exact same method instantly, intuitively, and joyfully because it perfectly matches their natural state of interacting with the world.
They don't fight it at all.
So ask yourself this. What other professional, logical, or deeply entrenched systems are you rigidly adhering to every single day at work or at school that are actually fighting against your own natural biology? And what would happen to your potential if you spent the next 21 days deliberately unlearning them?